Hello, everyone. This is going to be 1.1, learning about our past. Normally, I'll start with our learning objectives, but this is a shorter lecture and sort of a mixture of a couple of lectures, so we're just going to go right through it. So let's look at our past and see how we learn about history, and especially how we learn about prehistory. So, what is prehistory exactly? Well, it's the time before we had written records, basically. We have written records going back, give or take, about 5,000 years, and we have been able to translate or decipher most of these, although there are still a few that we don't know yet. However, the history of humanity goes back much further than 5,000 years. So, this time period before writing, before civilization, is known as prehistory. It's the history of humanity before the written record. Now, since we can't use a written record, we have to figure out how they lived scientifically and archaeologically. Instead, we have to use other forms of evidence to figure it out. So, without writing, people who are historians use evidence, other sorts of evidence to learn about the past, including physical objects left behind. These are called artifacts. So, if you go to a dig site and you see, like, okay, there's an axe, there's a stone, there's a knife. Those are artifacts. They are things left behind, and these can tell us a lot about the people who made them. And like I said, they can be things like clothing, coins, artwork, tools, weapons, many other things. Now, this does not mean that we are 100% sure about every single thing. Sometimes you can look at a dig site with artifacts, and two historians can come to two very different conclusions about it. So, for instance, this is a woman who died at a volcanic eruption called Pompeii back in about 79 AD. Now, she was found, her skeleton was found with rings on her fingers. Now, does that mean that she's rich, or does that mean that she was poor and she was running away from the volcano with the only things of value that she had in the world? Questions arise. Now, history covers all sorts of things. It covers kings and queens, it covers the regular people, it covers war, it covers politics, social life. It also just deals with people living their lives on a daily basis. And this is known as the study of humanity or anthropology. And this studies both the past. Anthropologists also, those study the present as well. They want to understand how humans develop and are still developing. And they look at a lot of different stuff, including human culture. A culture is the way of life of a society. You'll notice, by the way, that these words are in bold. That means that they are terms that you want to keep an eye on. So culture is handed down from one generation down through the next, oftentimes experientially. So oftentimes we pick up on our parents' culture a little bit, although sometimes we also rebel against it. One section, subsection of anthropology is archaeology, which is the study of people based on what they left behind. So basically, the study of humans based on their artifacts. This can be tools, weapons, jewelry, but even other things, like food, tombs, garbage piles, even bathrooms are used by archaeologists to tell us about the past. Oftentimes, new evidence can change the beliefs of historians. And this is important. History should be changeable. You can't just assume that you know everything, because you could find something else that completely flips it on its head and takes your conclusions and makes them go in a fully different direction. So, for instance, this news article came out in 2019 and says that, the idea that humans came over the Bering Strait may not be 100% true. It may be that they found a water route, not a land route. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, how do archaeologists find evidence of humanity? Well, they look at places where humans lived that has evidence of it. They start to dig it up very carefully, very orderly as well. They tend to dig it up in little sections to make sure they don't miss anything. They map it out. They keep track of everything they do. And scientists also help with this archaeological research. So, for instance, we can look at rocks and dirt, and geologists can take those samples and give us a good idea of how old they are. People who study plants, like botanists, and people who study animals, like zoologists, can tell us about plant and animal life. And more recently, we can take bones of long dead people, and using things like carbon 14 dating and DNA evidence, we can get very close to when they were alive. We can pinpoint with very good accuracy how old they are. We can also use more recently drones and lasers to survey even like thick jungles, and use lasers to get underneath the thick canopy of the leaves and the trees and find old ruins underneath. And we have been doing that. That this is an ancient Mayan ruin that is covered with thick jungle. And so the jungle on top of it disappears with the laser, and only this remains. Now, let's quickly look at discoveries in Africa as well. This is where human life began, is in Africa. This is one of the oldest skeletons ever found. This is known as Ardi, discovered in 1994 and believed to be over 4 million years old. If not human, then at least human-like, what we call a hominid. So, the best evidence we have for early humans and human-like people come out of Eastern Africa. And they were found starting in the 1930s by people like the Leakeys, Mary and Louis Leakey, who discovered remains in Tanzania in a place called Olduvai Gorge. This is where some of the oldest signs of hominids and humanity ever came from. We found simple tools there too, early examples of technology. And in the 1970s, they discovered a 3 million year old skeleton in Ethiopia nicknamed Lucy. They were actually listening to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds when they found it, the Beatles song, and so they named it Lucy after that. So, this is Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where we have found some of the oldest examples of hominids, human like beings. This is what Lucy may have looked like. She's what's known as an Australopithecus, which means southern ape. She's much more ape-like than human-like, but she did stand up on her hind legs and walk around, and so she is a distant relative of a human. Now, as time went on, hominids became less ape-like and much more human-like over the course of millions of years of evolution, and new groups would come in and take over and things like that. And so we have different groups of hominids leading up to Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us, humans. We had Homo habilis, tool makers. Homo habilis basically means handy human. Homo erectus means a standing upright human. We, like I said, are Homo sapiens, which means wise human. We're actually Homo sapiens sapien, which means wise human. Eventually, these hominids, though, migrated out of Africa and into Europe and Asia, and eventually they made it around the world using boats. That's mainly humans. About between 250,000 and 100,000 years ago, humanity became the hominid group that had the best hold on the world, Homo sapiens. And we will look more at that in the Paleolithic and Neolithic cultures next time.